Hello and welcome. This is Jasmine and I'm here with my auntie Shon, and we want to show up for you. To have and to normalize conversations together that you may not have had the opportunity to engage in within your generation, your atmosphere, or even your household. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Welcome to Showing Up For You.
Yes, showing up for you. I think it's important that we introduce ourselves and give the people a little bit of meat on us.
Yes, right? Absolutely. We're family, yes. Not by blood, but by marriage, relationships. And I think this podcast was birthed out of talks in the car, inappropriate talks in Target that were like, why are we having life talks in an aisleway? But you know, we met when we were both in a very transitional period of our lives. Mm-hmm. I was about to graduate high school and going off to college, and you started dating my lovely uncle, and I never had an aunt that I was super tight with, and I was like, yes! Finally!
Y'all, I was not dating Isaac. I was dating Isaac and Jasmine.
So true.
I was dating two people.
And here we are.
Yeah, you know what? I almost feel like we've been podcasting. It's just never been recorded. Because I think the beautiful thing about a relationship is that we do challenge one another. Mm-hmm. Like Jasmine said, I met her when I was dating Isaac, and seeing her grow allowed me to understand boundaries, allowed me to understand what it looks like to not have boundaries, to not understand them, and then to be invaded because you're kind of clueless about boundaries. And so we both went through this, like she said, this transition of, hey, what do my boundaries look like, and how do we respect one another's boundaries? Yeah. And it actually drew us closer than we ever intended, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I think that, for me, speaking personally, you were coming into my life, marrying into our family, you were somebody who respected my boundaries in a dramatically different way that I didn't realize until years later that I think that's why we have the relationship that we have now, because I can look back, 7 years ago and be like, oh, she got it and did not make me have to explain myself. And so now here we are, fully developing our relationship. And I'm just like, oh, she gets all of it. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus.
Well, it was important because the thing is, you didn't owe me an explanation. You have a mom. You don't need another mom. Mm-hmm. I've been in your shoes where you're trying to figure yourself out, and it's scary because you don't know if it's better to figure yourself out or figure out how to fit in with everybody else. And that's such a tough spot for a lot of people. And so as we talk about boundaries, which is our topic for the day, guys, it's important to know that we had to learn this stuff the hard way. Yeah. This is all coming from personal experience. This is all coming from okay, I hit this wall 10 times and I get it.
Yes, absolutely.
I get it.
So we want to start off with the question of, how do you define boundaries?
Oh my God. So good. For me, boundaries are, they're like permissions I give myself to gain or feel respected. I'd say another way is requirements that I apply to support my healthiest self, which sadly, I didn't know who my healthiest self was until I was in college. Wow. You know what I mean? And so learning that was hard, learning that I'm not actually healthy and there's a better version of me, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? And then learning, how do I protect that in a way that I'm not just rude to everybody else, right, but I'm also hey, protect this girl, me, yes, at all costs. So it was, like I said, it's requirements that I have to apply to vouch for me. What do you think?
Man, I think that in your life, boundaries can change, and the meaning of boundaries can change as well. I am in my mid-20s, which is so weird. But, at this very point in my life, I think that boundaries creates freedom for myself. I always saw boundaries as keep yourself in a box. It keeps things out. It keeps things in. And so navigating that, it's created this freedom for myself that the more in tune with who I am and my needs, it gives me a space to walk in confidence. Oh, wow. Which leads to walking in freedom for me. So I think that boundaries has given me this realization of like, there can be freedom in this, and you can leave behind that negative connotation that's been attached to you for so long about boundaries.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, that's so real.
Yeah.
That's so real. It's interesting to know, like, and this is just for anybody listening, you know, however long it takes you to figure out what boundaries are for you, or how to protect those boundaries, or how to define or clarify those boundaries, that is your journey. You'll learn to be able to communicate or clarify that, like, but it is not something that might happen overnight. Right. Give yourself some grace, you know, to figure that thing out, because once you learn the importance of self, it's so much easier to say, hey, I don't deserve this. Right. Like, I'm better if I eliminate this thing. And so I actually want to ask you, you know, one question that kind of makes me wonder, like, about boundaries is, how do we go about protecting our boundaries? Like, as we define them, how are we, like, guarding ourselves and carrying those out, whether it's to others or to ourselves? What do you think that looks like?
Yeah, in my life, I think that looks like going back to self. It's checking in with myself. I think it's really huge. Like, you know, like offline we were talking, you had asked me the question of like, well, what does like your self-talk look like? Oh, yeah. And for me, it's like asking myself questions. Like, for me, it starts at the beginning of my day. Like, where are you at? What's the tone of the day that you want to set? What are things that you're allowing in your life right now that are good, but what are things that you're allowing in your life that are bad and not healthy for you as well? And so it's like acknowledging where I'm at, but also holding myself accountable for those things. And I would say, like, for me, it's very introspective. Like, I'm an introspective type of person. I know for some people, they need to externally process, and I entirely encourage that as well. But for me, in protecting my boundaries, that's what it looks like. And then from there, when I can set that in, then I feel like I can go forward in letting people know this is how we can interact with one another, because I figured it out first. So then I can help give people a better understanding instead of miscommunicating, because internally I don't know what the heck is going on. Right. Yeah.
Like, I'm confused.
Right. Like, no, we don't want confusion on any front here. Like, let's be clear. Right. Be clear with yourself so you can be clear with others.
Right. And that self-talk is so important. Like, that self-pep talk is like, look, we're going to go in here, you know, and I think what I like about what you said is, like, how am I contributing to the room? You know what I mean? Like, what am I giving the room? And can you share about that? Like, I can't remember it. I'm going to butcher it, y'all. But this girl is speaking wisdom.
Well, something that I had mentioned to you was that if I have an understanding of who I am, I will understand the value that I bring into the room, but I can also understand the presence that I bring into a room as well. You can bring in a negative presence as well. Yes. And I think that's something that if you're not cognizant and you don't have the self-awareness, I think self-awareness is huge in that way of like, I just want to know what I'm bringing to the room. Right. You know, and if it's positive or if it's negative, because I think that we have to set a boundary for ourselves as well. Like, if we care about people enough, I'm going to respect them enough to actually exit myself, because I'm entirely going to probably step over their boundary too.
Right. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to add any more stress.
No. I was like, let me save you from this, somewhere else.
let me save you from this, sis. As I think about like protecting boundaries, I think for me, it's clear communication. Like, I am very good at letting you know how I feel. I will not muddy the conversation. I am very good at communicating clearly. And I know that because I am more afraid of being misunderstood or confusing you on, you know, who I am, rather than anything else. And so my biggest thing is like clear communication, you know. So if that looks like in a relationship, whether we're friends or, you know, even with my husband, my now husband, is, hey, like, this is something that makes me feel uncomfortable, you know, or even if it's a conversation that could have happened, you know, a few weeks ago with my husband or a family member or a friend. Hey, that thing that you just did, I feel really uncomfortable about it. And I don't fear in addressing it, you know, in whatever environment. And so besides clear communication, like, I feel that letting like fear of another person's response, it dictates the value of your boundaries.
Wow.
So what that looks like is we've all had the situation of like, we react to a situation or a problem, and we might not have clarified if it's a boundary or if we identify with ourselves that it's a boundary, but we may react to it, and another person will say, it's not that serious, or that's no big deal, or you're overreacting. Like, these are statements that like dictate or devalue, you know, where your boundaries are. And like, old Shon was like, you're right, I'm emotional.
No,
like, you know
so
what I mean?
you were like, yay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, that was old Shon. This Shon is like, nah, this is what you're not gonna do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Don't
I do
play
not
here.
accept your identification of, you know what I mean? You know, how you identify the value of my boundaries. But that is a big part of protecting my boundaries, is if you know how strongly I feel about them, sooner or later you're gonna realize, like, don't go there with her. You know, I don't, you know, whether you're irritated with me or not, just don't go there with her. Okay. She's really strict about her boundaries.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think our next question that we wanted to tackle was like, how do you respect boundaries? How do you respect other people's boundaries? Because I think that, you know, we're talking about self, but there is that balance of like selfish with self-awareness.
Ooh, that's
and so
good.
How is it that you in your life, you respect other people's boundaries?
Oh my God. The safest thing for me is to assume that everybody has it together.
Woo!
Like, I know that sounds horrible, and here it is. If I know me, and what you guys can get this far, you know, so far, is I am very clear, and I hold my boundaries at a high standard. For me and my family, I have babies, and even now I want them to know that their boundaries matter. So I like to assume that everybody is like fighting for the respect of boundaries.
Yeah.
And so if I assume that, then I know me, and I'm going to ask you before I do something that I would, you know, that I'm not sure about how you feel, or I'm going to be understanding when it comes to, you know, whether you are comfortable with something I'm doing or uncomfortable with something I'm doing. So for me, I like to be ready to be rejected or ready to submit. I don't agree with negotiating my boundaries, so I don't expect other people to negotiate as I invade or as I like go about, like, move freely.
Kind of like the exception to the rule.
Right.
Kind of saying.
Right. And so being ready for rejection, that might look like, hey, you know what, Shon, I don't like, you know, when you do this. I could very well say, hey, this is a strong boundary for me and I can't go against that. And they, you know, they're like, okay, well, we can't go any further. I respect that. And like we talked about, I'll eliminate myself. But I also feel that if in fact I am the exception to the rule, that's an honor.
Yeah.
Because I respect your space so much that I'm not going to ruin it by coming in and taking advantage of the fact that you let down a boundary or like eased up a boundary, you know, for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's great. And I think that with making almost the assumption that people are wanting boundaries for their best selves, if they don't, with the way that you interact with those people, it subconsciously helps them create a healthy boundary for themselves, you know, which I think is like, so it's beautiful. Like it's great to have friends like that, you know, in their lives.
Yes.
You know, respecting boundaries for me looks like getting to know someone outside of the instant "how are you doing" question. I'm good. But are you good?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I swear I'll answer that question. I'm like, I'm good. No, absolutely not. She just got out of the car crying. She over here had a mess. Called her auntie, having a meltdown. Like, no, she's not. Fine, people. But just
it's
knowing.
It's fine. Everything's fine.
Right. Honestly, I'd say that like too much. But going like to that point of like, I think that everybody has a longing for somebody to know them deeper than just beyond that I'm good, response. And with, tying that back is that the more that you get to know someone, the more individualistic things that you know about them, it begins to help you know how to navigate them. The more that I know about your life, and not saying that you need to let every single person in your life, that's not what I'm saying whatsoever, but like in the context of people who are close to you, I need to know more so I know how to respect you. I think that's huge. Yeah. Because if I'm left to assume, I'm left in La La Land, I make all of these scenarios
like unintentional mistakes happen, like unintentional moves.
Yes, exactly. And then I won't know until it's too late. But I want to know before it's too late. Yeah. Like, let's just jump the gun here. And I think that when you know or you have a better understanding, you can, as an individual, like I can make the decision to respect you enough to be like, yep, bet we're going to move forward and I'm going to respect this avenue of your life. Or I'm going to respect you enough to be like, I disagree with this, but I respect that this is something for you. But out of respect for you, I'm going to politely exit myself from this scenario. So I think that it just all comes down to getting to know people at even just like one layer deeper than the surface level, I think can really give you understanding of how to respect people in their lives.
That's so good because so even like years ago, when I first like got that good time with you, there were things I knew without knowing, meaning like because we had taken that time to get to know one another, you created this template. And it's almost like, even if I didn't know, I'm like, based off of what she's already said, I don't think she'd go for this. You know what I mean? Yeah. So as we go further, I'm like, I don't think it's a good idea. You know what I mean? So there's certain things I'm careful about addressing or communicating because I'm like, I've seen that this isn't the healthiest thing, in our relationship. And so I think it's so good what you said about speaking to that person and like, hey, let's have a good conversation because at least I know, because you're not going to cover everything in that first encounter, right? Yep. Or you're not going to cover everything in that first really good conversation. But at least I have a template. At least I have an idea of, okay, I shouldn't do this. Yep. This might, have a negative reaction or this might seem invasive, I would say. Yeah. Right?
Ooh, yeah. It all comes down to respect. I think in both scenarios, there are different approaches, but it's just all about like respecting the other individual.
Yeah. What can interrupt or discourage boundaries? This has to be the most important question, I guess, or topic of this moment. Like tell me how you feel about that. What can interrupt or discourage boundaries?
Man, when you asked me this question earlier, I was ready to yell, shout, run up and down the stairs because I was like, you. And when I was saying you, I was meaning me. But
expose yourself.
Right. I'm like, are you speaking to me? Are you trying to expose me? Man, I'm like, hold on.
I am appalled.
Right. But it's you. I genuinely believe that we can interrupt or discourage ourselves without even knowing it.
Like self-sabotage.
Yes.
Oh.
Like, subconsciously we can think that we're setting a boundary for ourselves, but we call it something different. We call it a coping mechanism. We call it we're setting an expectation for ourselves, or we call it setting a standard for ourselves. But really, you were trying to create a boundary for yourself. But the big question in that is, was it healthy or was it unhealthy?
Oh my gosh.
And if it's unhealthy, you're going down the self-sabotage road. Like, you had asked me earlier of what, like, give me an example of what that looked like. And for me, I went through some things in my life and I like made this really rash decision, was like, I'm just going to do me. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be independent, and I'm not going to let people close to my life. Got my family, had my couple friends. I'm cool. And let's be real, there's a lot of people out, I'm talking to you. If you're listening to this, you are that person. But the road that it led down to was me being alone. And that's it.
Oh my gosh.
And that I came to a moment of like, I don't want to be alone anymore. But I set this unhealthy boundary for myself that I wouldn't let anybody in, or anybody who tried to get in, they're not going to come back into your life. So it's like I had to make a dramatic shift of being like, okay, externally, what is it that I can do to create a healthy boundary for myself, to live in that freedom that I was talking about earlier? And so my big answer is like, you can get in the way of your own self.
I am exposed. Like I feel naked. That's so good. That's so good. I'm laughing because it's like I grew up with a big family, and we didn't need any friends. Like there's a lot of us. And that's just on like my mom's side, right? I have 8 other, uncles. And I have a plethora of cousins. So I didn't need any like extra friends for like a birthday party turn up, right?
Right.
So,
you had all of them. They were
everybody.
there.
We were present. But so I get the idea of, this like self-sabotage, where we are, we can like exclude other people, because for us it was like, I don't need any else. I have all the friends I need.
All we need.
We all here, right? And that was it. That's so good. But what's crazy is that's something I think a lot of people don't know that they're doing. It's amazing that you were able to figure that out, sadly the hard way, but creating that boundary that was an unhealthy boundary. For me, I feel like toxic relationships can interrupt and discourage boundaries, and mainly like this argument or this like internal war of loyalty versus self-health, which that is actually a topic that we are going to discuss in a later episode. So you guys tune in when that pops up. It's going to be good. But so toxic relationships, I feel like there are so many times we have relationships with, whether it's family, whether it's longtime friends, whether it's like your intimate partner, and we are choosing the idea of relationship over the idea of self-health or boundaries. You know what I mean? And so we start to like look at loyalty over self-health, well, they've always been there for me, but then if we break that apart, while they were there, was your hair falling out? Was you stressed? Right. Was you, were you struggling all the time? Were you able to be yourself? Were you judged? And so there's so much that we don't look into where we're like, but loyalty is key. And we're losing ourselves within that. It's almost like we're choosing like the length of relationship over the quality of it. You can be in a relationship with somebody for years and you're not moving anywhere. You're not progressing. You guys are not, you know what I mean? And so you look at, am I more focused on the fact that they've been here? This is what I'm used to, or, hey, I'm my best self when I'm with you, so boundaries are disrupted. Boundaries are, they're discouraged in those situations, because now we're going back to kind of something I was saying earlier is, it's like we're more worried about how we appear to other people or the fear of the response of other people. You know what I mean? And instead of the like identifying of self, or the identifying of your healthiest self.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that, that can start really early on, not just in a family setting, but even in friendship. You think about in school, like, I just want some friends and I'm going to be so loyal to them.
Yeah.
And I want them to think that I'm the best person or whatever. And so you discredit so much of who you are,
right,
and you diminish things about yourself and your boundaries or spaces that are things that you allow in your life just so that you can prove your loyalty to other people. Let me prove it to them. I promise you they'll get it. And then when I get them in, they'll understand who I am. It doesn't happen that way, though.
It does.
It usually blows up in your face, and like it's just all bad from there, you know?
Like, that was a hard lesson.
Yeah, it's hard stuff, but I think, you know, we can, as a mid-25-year-old to a beautiful mother of 2 beautiful children and the best uncle in the world, like, we're still learning and unlearning what it looks like to create space in our life that we want to allow, and also things that we don't want to allow but have possibly been in our lives our whole lives.
Right. And, you know, it's the dynamic between the two of us. And guys, this is actually one of the reasons we started this podcast, is because, you know, Jasmine being in her mid-20s and me, my early 30s, we have been through some similar and some very different times in our life. And coming through that, we're able to share different perspectives and different wisdom for one another, and actually represent the beauty of having that relationship with somebody that's a little older or somebody that's a little younger. We learn from each other every day. And when I say every day, I mean every day. And I'm thankful for that. And so the dynamic that we have is it's not just, you know, me, you know, that's early 30s, married with children, right? And not just, you know, someone like Jasmine, who is super successful, enjoying and living her best life mid-20s. And we're able to bring these different experiences to the table. So guys, this is our first episode, and we are just so excited to continue this journey. And we're actually super grateful that you have a listening ear for this.
Yeah.
You know, we're just enjoying ourselves, right?
Just having all the chats. But thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
Please let us know any of your thoughts, things that you're thinking of. What is it that you liked? What is it that you dislike? Because Auntie Shon, she's all about like, listen, I want to know how you're feeling. Yes or no.
What are your boundaries? What do you guys do to secure those boundaries? You know? So let us know in the comments, and we look forward to speaking to you guys next episode.
See you then.
See you then.